and the Aspen Institute, please welcome to the stage Mo Fathelbab of Forum Resources Network and Harvard Business School Alumni Forums.
Thank you. Good morning. Great to see everybody. What a great event it's been. So welcome to the closing session of the Visionaries Summit, The Road to Belonging. When I hear my introduction, by the way, it's always funny to me because I nearly flunked out of University of Maryland, and here I do work teaching Harvard Business School alumni. What I work with them on is the soft skills. So they're all very hard-charging, very competitive, very focused on success, and the soft skills is where I work with them. And we're going to do some of this today. But this has been a great event, and I want to remind you what Johnny Taylor said day one. We're here to start a movement. We're not just here to learn a few things. We're not just here to take a few notes. We're here to start a movement. And so we're going to talk about this throughout the couple of hours that we have today in this closing session. But first, we have a treat. We have an exclusive preview to a documentary, The Road Trip to Belonging. And that preview, you are the first to see. And so please help me in welcoming to the stage the two producers of that, Cordell Carter and Semyon Cecily. Come on up, please.
Thank you. And you all thought you got rid of me. I'm back. How's everybody doing today? Okay, we're gonna do a little better, folks. You know I need affirmation. How's everybody doing today? Are you pumped? Great. We were so honored to be here, Semyon and I. Thank you all so much for joining in this effort. This is part of a larger body of work, this road trip to belonging. It didn't come out of anywhere. It came out of a lot of conversations I've been having over years with leaders, through Aspen. I mean, probably over the last 5 years, cultivated 120, 130 seminars with leaders like yourselves all over the world. And we all have these downtimes. We're asking questions of each other, like, how does this work in your organization? What are you doing different? And it comes down to this issue, we all want to belong. And it's a sticky situation here in the United States, especially over the last 2 years. But some would say much longer. Maybe we just start to notice over the last 2 years. So the question is, what's the solution? How do we get from where we are with tension, inefficiency, to a place where everyone can just be? Wouldn't that be amazing, just to be? When I was a younger person, people made fun of a gentleman named Rodney King who said, can't we all just get along? And I want to update that and says, can we all just belong? Can we? I think we can. Semyon.
Thank you so much. And Cordell, you have been on quite a journey. Mm-hmm. And it has not been one that is really just shown here. It's been one that's actually started with a deeper sense of why. And as we look at that, I really want to actually start to ask you, why now? Why go on to this journey to actually look at several civic organizations, philanthropic organizations, arts organizations? You mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, it comes from a deep belief that this is a solvable issue, okay? We are a young country. The America that we know and love actually started in 1966, not 1776. The version that we had, this is called the fourth founding, if you will, if you read John Meacham. Amazing public intellectual, by the way, at Vanderbilt. He's incredible. John Meacham, all his podcasts, just consume them all, trust me. But the first free election in this country, the first election where my grandmothers voted, as 35-year-old women, mothers of 6, was 1966 because you had federal troops in Portsmouth, Virginia, ensuring they wouldn't be harmed on their way to the polls. That's when we became the dynamic country that we are today. So there's a lot of room for improvement, and I'm convinced this is solvable. But it is only solvable if we approach DE&I the right way. Here's the facts. 90%, more or less, of executive leadership, of board leadership, are white men. And the conversation that we're having about DE&I, have been having for the last generation or so, has been focused on everyone except executive suite. When we know best practices has been elevated in some of these interviews you're going to see from the Road Trip to Belonging documentary that's not quite there yet, but it'll be there soon, are from leaders. They say that if the executives aren't behind that and pushing it and making it part of their personal metrics, it doesn't work. So I think we're talking to the wrong people. We should be talking up rather than down, okay? And frankly, what does it mean for an executive to say, I'm contributing to a place that I don't belong? Who wants to do that? So we have to change the language.
I agree.
We have to update. We have to make sure that we're building a place for everyone. And that's really what fired me up about this, just exhausted at things just not working. All the conversations I've had, be it Berlin, be it Aspen, wherever, it's the same conversation. Yeah. The only thing changes is the language.
Yeah. You know, I'm reminded, and I want to go into a bit of a clip here. I'm reminded of when we were really in the middle of this journey. For those who don't know, we actually had the opportunity to hear from 29 organizations. Those organizations range from who you heard here over the last few days, Brian Kemp, Lieutenant Governor of Georgia. They actually included others such as Walmart themselves at scale. And we were in the middle of this trip, and it was interesting because I said, Cordell, why don't you reflect again on a why? And we were in Atlanta, and we were filming in an art gallery. I'd love to show that clip.
Welcome to Zuccott Gallery in Atlanta, Georgia, where one couldn't help but have a sense of belonging. Why? Because I see faces, images, colors that remind me of people I know, people I'm related to, myself even. Take it a next step and just reflect upon the people that we've been able to talk to on this road trip to belonging here in the region. They reflect the diversity of this city and in this region. And I'm beginning to wonder, why can't more of the country look like Atlanta? This idea that people can thrive, and then they know they belong. But if I don't see how I can thrive, I know I don't belong. Atlanta has figured that out. They figured it out insofar as their people of color are concerned. And my question is, what are we going to do about it? What is the role of the philanthropic sector in incentivizing belonging? Because if we can incentivize this change in our national civic culture, I think we'll be a better nation, a better version of ourselves. And frankly, our current moment of this moral reckoning of the 2020s demands that we do something different and do it at a very, very high level. So I ask you all to join us on this road trip to belonging by actually doing something, incentivizing this future that you want to see.
You know, Cordell, it was interesting because we came to Zuccott Art Gallery after spending 2 days prior on the campus of the King Center. So you were at this vulnerable place. And what I'm wondering, being in that vulnerable place now, is, especially after the last few days, can belonging be simply defined as it's DE&I 2.0? Is it more complicated than that? You know, how do you make this just simple for all of us?
Well, given the complexity of our world, of our organizations that you all help lead, I think if there were ever a time where simple is more, now is that time. And condensing the language, I mean, I love data and I love pie charts. I'm a Carnegie Mellon guy, so I love quant. That's fantastic. But quant doesn't really move the human spirit, okay? The human connection is what moves people. And we just have to be real. I think this is one of the reasons I love artists so much, because they don't care what I think. It's about the expression, and the expression hurts your feelings, too bad. Well, in a corporate space, we can't do that, right? You can't do that in a nonprofit place. You really can't do that when you have a board of directors. But what can you do? You can connect as a human to human. And so I think we're just trying to get a little more, take a step back, a little less professional and more human. And this is how I express myself. I convene, we lead, we talk, this is what we do. So I'm doing what I can do with the realization of the following. This perfect place I imagine America to be, I won't see it in my lifetime. Neither will you. Likely our children won't. Maybe our great-grandchildren will, hopefully. But the point is we have to continue working towards that thing, because the aggregate of those efforts will lead to a tsunami of belonging down the road. So as a people, we will get there. Me individually, no. But I'm content in the knowledge that I have to do my part, and that's enough for me right now.
Love that. Love that. You know, someone who did their part and is doing their part is in financial services. Very highly regulated organization, specifically at an institution that's based in the South. And I love her definition of belonging. And I'm wondering if we can go to that clip.
Given your role, one of the country's largest banks, in charge of some of these issues and as it relates to the vital line of business, how do you define belonging and what does that look like at your organization and your role?
Sure, it's a great question. I'll start with what I think it looks like. And I will probably age myself a little bit. I call it the norm effect. So if you recall the TV show Cheers,
Yes.
and Norm,
Yes.
one of the characters of the show, every time he walked into the bar Cheers, what happened?
Hey!
Hey!
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
Everyone knew it was Norm. And Norm had a place to sit. No one sat in Norm's seat.
Yeah.
Before Norm could get to his seat, there was a drink sliding down his way. So for me, belonging is that norm effect, right? Where everyone has a sense of the role that they play in an organization, and the organization also knows their role. There is commonality of purpose. You feel as though it's not about fitting in, right? Because you have a purpose. And you are free to be authentically who you are. You know, I think that's the heart really of belonging, is that you don't have to pretend.
Boy, I love the Norm effect.
Yeah,
I love that
I miss
show.
Cheers. I
yeah,
know, I really do miss
absolutely
Cheers.
love
It
the
was a
show.
fantastic
So I mean,
show.
you can't go wrong with
Totally
any,
aging myself,
yes,
but
yes.
as an elementary school student,
I
that
mean,
was my
come on,
gift.
NBC.
Yes.
I mean, what Cosby Show
Oh
was
my
on
gosh,
that night.
they
I
had
mean,
the
oh my
killer lineup.
goodness.
I'm sorry, we're
you know,
freaking out
different
about-
world. It was a couple things that Family Ties.
Family Ties was awesome as well. Yes, it was.
Absolutely. But the Norm effect was truly. Gosh, I guess we did date ourselves, but the Norm
But my
effect.
point, did everyone get that,
Yeah.
the norm effect? Didn't you instantly
Yeah.
resonate with you? Simple is more. That's what we're discovering on this thing. Simple is more.
You know, it's interesting because when I look at that clip and I see how simply she defines it, for an organization that's based in Birmingham, Alabama, that is responsible for serving people throughout the Southeast,
Yeah,
who has a history of challenges.
lots of them.
And she says the same thing that you said. If the CEO doesn't get it, it doesn't matter. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit. We had the opportunity to go to another challenging place that we're happy that we had some representatives there. We went to Tulsa, Oklahoma. You know, fortunate to serve on a board there and able to take us there. But the truth of the matter is they have a deep history.
Yeah. And what I loved about Tulsa, they weren't running from their history.
No.
Well, let me say, the leaders weren't running. The state legislature was doing something different. That's a different topic. But the leaders were actively engaged. They were not necessarily celebrating their history,
Right.
but they certainly weren't shying away from it. They were telling the whole truth. And when you do that, you create just vulnerability. And people like, I trust you now because you're saying the quiet thing out loud. Okay? You're being human. You know what happened here. And moreover, you have multiple levels of this. So we talked to the head of the Cherokee Nation.
Yes.
And I learned some things I didn't know. He's contending with an issue with Congress right now of all of these members they expelled once they started getting wealth from casinos. These members were part of the freedmen, okay? Where the Tulsa riots happened was freedmen land. It was a Creek and Cherokee land, just for the freedmen that came with them on the Trail of Tears, okay? And these are the folks they excluded when the money changed. And Congress said basically, okay, that's fine. Do not talk to us until you bring back your members. So he's on a campaign to get the members back. That is not the conversation I was expecting to have with one of the top indigenous leaders in the country. It was shocking and it was very vulnerable. I don't know if, we don't have that clip. because you all don't want to see me crying. You've heard enough of me. You don't want to hear that. But I really appreciated the fact that not only that was Chief Warner, we talked to the head of the largest utility in the city. You know, he has employees that represent every spectrum of society, from linesmen to office staff to people he's never seen. And so when an outage happens, guess what? Those folks have to be activated. But if they don't feel like they belong, why on earth would I leave my family in danger to help another family?
That's right.
Okay?
You know, he was so interesting, and I want to actually get to that clip because I think that hearing from a CEO really creates and sets the tone. And I also want to give acknowledgement to George Kaiser.
Yes, yes.
George Kaiser opened up Tulsa for us.
Absolutely.
And he said, well, if there's anybody that can speak to CEOs, I've kind of sold a couple billion-dollar businesses. I think I can speak to CEOs. So why don't we go to the next clip and hear from a CEO.
You're leading one of the region's largest public utilities. And from that perch, I wonder if you could describe the long game in your own words.
Well, it's appropriate that we meet in this space, in this location. I think the gathering place speaks to a spirit that exists in Tulsa that we hope will exist across our company, that draws people in on a level that is experiential. One of the things about this space that's so unique is you'll see people from all places around the town and all places around the country who come to experience this unique facility, this park. But these buildings and the quality of the buildings and the way that they respect the people who come to visit. We hope that the experience that our employees have and the experience that our customers have is one where they feel personally respected, that they feel honored. We spend a lot of time visiting with our employees about the importance of what they do and how they fit into the overall work of the company, so that they understand there's real honor in their work, and that they understand that they belong in a way that's unique to the gifts that they bring. They're not just a cog in the machine, but they bring something that's really unique that makes our company different and better as we seek to be a great place to work and to serve our customers.
You know, it was interesting. We heard from CEOs such as Sid, true leader, somebody who was just appointed CEO from Chief Operating Officer. And then we said, let's go to a place that both you and I know very well, but let's have a broader conversation. This can't just be for the private sector. It also has to be for the civic sector and the arts. You've referenced the arts before. Why is this important?
Well, I think arts is your highest form of human expression. Like we are expressing ourselves here professionally, and that's fantastic. And artists, the way they do it is through media, is through beautiful photos and pictures and dance and all these things. It's the highest form. The very first form of entertainment was hand mimes on a cave with the fire, you know? And then it went to drawings, and now we have just these amazing forms of expression all over the place. So if you want the truth, talk to an artist. When I was a kid in my dad's church, I hung out with the organist. Why? He was mercurial. He was always had an attitude against Dad, and he would tell me something that Dad wouldn't. And I thought he was hilarious, right? All 7 of them. We went through a lot of them. They were fantastic. But if I wanted the truth about something, I wanted to feel the power of their expression. And so I gravitated towards the arts. And so it's been no different in my adult life. Always hanging out at museums. This is kind of my jam. Museums, art galleries, I love that stuff. But they play such an important role in culture, cultural leadership. If you look, I travel a lot for Aspen and other things around the world. I have these amazing moments where people come to me with Tupac Shakur lyrics on their shirts. I was like, hey, look. And I'm like, I don't know that song, but that's awesome. Thank you, right? But they are relating to me, all right? They're saying, hey, I know something about your culture. Your culture has come here. So they are the spear point, if you will, of American brand. Brand America, our arts folks are leading it. The people are hearing our music before they understand our policies, all right? And so I think it's important to include them in any conversation about societal change because they are already doing it. They're already doing it. It's our first export.
It is. It's our biggest export.
Our biggest export, absolutely.
Is our culture. You know, we had the opportunity to meet with Dr. Elizabeth Barker.
Yes.
And out of all the art museums, yes, we were at the Zuccotti Art Gallery, but we had the opportunity to go to the Frick.
Yes.
And that's a big thing. So I'd love for us to go to a clip to really hear from Dr. Barker, who's the executive director of the Frick, so that people can hear from her.
Certainly.
As the executive director of the Frick Museum, what does that look like from your vantage point, belonging and thriving?
I think it needs to impact absolutely everything we do. I might even take a step back and reflect on museums in general as well as the Frick. I think our cultural history has its origin as sites of social control, soft control, but places where the elite intended to indoctrinate the working classes with certain kinds of behavior that they found appealing. In many ways, museums are part of industrial culture, but museums have the potential to be sites of radical, innovative thinking. What distinguishes works of art is their ability to contain, not even contain, to spill over with an infinite number of narratives. People can take from works of art what they need at that moment. And if as museums, we're able to shift our perception of the work that we're doing, we could be sites of extraordinary empowerment for all people.
You know, I'm reminded of being there, and typically a lot of people come in and they see the Frick Art Museum, but they don't see the invisible wall. There's an invisible wall when you come out. You have the choice to turn right or turn left. You turn left and you can see some of the old Carnegie halls. You can see some of all the old Mellon homes. To the right, you see where George Benson, the musician, grew up in Wilkinsburg, and the challenges of that community. There's an invisible line that's right there. And so the question I really always have is, you know, can this stuff be done at scale? I get it at a micro Pittsburgh level. I get it at a Tulsa level during this season. So I'm wondering if you can talk about, you know, maybe your vision, or how do you see this growing at scale? And then maybe we can go to a clip of that.
Yeah, I think this is one of the most perplexing issues that you all are facing. Your employees represent America. And I'm saying that the bell curve, right? The 80% in the middle that's just trying to live and take care of their kids. They're not very political. And then these very loud extremes, those 10% on the left, 10% on the right, that soak up all of the attention. And you think, oh, that's what people think. It's actually not. But they have an inordinate amount of control over the political narrative and social narrative because they are so active. And so, like, how do you, as a leader, kind of filter through all of that? I think storytelling is a secret weapon because it's unfiltered, right? You can sit there, you know, like I'm looking at Sid. Sid has 6,000 employees in 7 states. Like, as much as he likes to visit people, there's no way he can visit them all. That's all he would be doing. But he can send them a story. He can send them a story, and they will get to hear directly from Sid, unfiltered. This is what I think. This is what I believe. And so I think organizations, especially the very, very large ones, they have to employ the same methods that those extremes do. And that's an overuse of media. That's a little louder about your particular perspective. Otherwise, that 80% in the middle, they won't hear you.
You know, I think that when we think about scale, quite honestly, at this point, we have to think about those people who are on the front lines all the way to the boardroom.
Absolutely.
As we've talked about. I think no company represents that better at this point than someone like a Walmart.
Oh, I agree.
And so I'd love to go to the clip where we had the opportunity to go to Bentonville, Arkansas, and hear from a leader who's actually been at this journey for 6 years, prior to George Floyd.
That's right.
So let's see the next clip.
Hi, Ben, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great, so as you know, Aspen Institute and SHRM are on a road trip to belonging. And we are trying to elevate the national conversation on race, equity, and inclusion, and belonging to this thing where we're only focused on the outcome, and that outcome being a society and organizations where everyone belongs and everyone has equitable opportunities to thrive. As the Chief Diversity and Equity Inclusion Officer for the world's largest employer, I'm dying to know,
What does belonging and thriving look like in your neck of the woods?
Oh, wow. What a question. You know, it's interesting. We know that Walmart is a microcosm of the society that we live in. So if you think about the conversations that are happening on the extreme left and the extreme right, we have people on both those extremes and in the middle who are members of our company. We also know that we want to have an environment where people feel comfortable, welcome, and safe to come to work every day to be their whole self. We realize that there is talent in all walks of life, and we want access to that talent inside the company, but we also want all those walks of life to actually shop with us.
No, Cordell.
Before we go, I just thought Ben was so impressive. You'll see when you see the larger film, he talked a lot about changing the neural networks and had a very scientific, almost engineering approach to DE&I. And it makes sense because he is a technologist. He's not a DE&I professional. Well, he wasn't before getting into the role. And we talked to a few other folks on the road trip that were not DE&I people, but it's such a business imperative that they were shifted or asked to do it by their chief executive. And I think it's a practice that I would encourage because it is so integral to your business. I mean, we've heard about demographics and all of that. I'll give you one statistic that I recently learned from some colleagues in Utah. The high school graduating class of 2025 will be the last majority white high school graduating class in the United States of America. You know, we've been talking about this demographic cliff for 20 years. Ladies and gentlemen, we're on the precipice right now. So what does that mean for your customers? What does that mean for your employees? It means you need a variety of perspectives in your executive suite tackling these tough issues that are so integral to your business, because this is who you're selling to, this is who you're hiring. And so bringing more technologists that can say, you know, we have to change the way people think because that's important for our sustainability. Like, I don't think a classical DE&I person would have come to that conclusion, okay? You would need an engineer that has gone through coding and all this different stuff to re-engineer the way you do DE&I at the world's largest employer. And so I think some just tremendous stories from this road trip, and I'll stop and let Simeon lead, sorry.
No, there have been some great stories, and I love that perspective. Ben was incredible.
Yeah.
Ben also said very clearly, you know, look, he's seen this before. He's over 70 years old. He heard others say, I've seen enough talking. I've seen enough models. Mm-hmm. Last time I checked, I also saw signs that weren't belonging to me and welcoming. And so something has to change. And quite honestly, even if we finish this road trip like we have with 29, I don't think it's good enough, Cordell.
I agree.
I think we have to hear from several people here. Where do we go next? You represent chapters, you represent organizations. We can show you more to clips, but quite frankly, what do we bring to your organizations? What storytelling comes out of your organizations? Who should be representing your organization from the front line to the CEO to the board? So maybe we should.
I agree. To the audience.
Yeah.
Where should this road trip go next? Who's signing up? Not all at once now. Yes. What's your name again?
I'm Danielle Barrett.
Which organization?
The School Nutrition Association.
Say that one more time.
School Nutrition Association.
School Nutrition Association. Love that. Love that. What a great perspective, because during the Ben Hassan interview, he was very, very open. And he said that there are 4 systems that do not create equity just by looking at the numbers. He said the health system, which I would put nutrition underneath, the justice system, the education system, and the corporate system, or the private sector. He said, so what if we actually have to change this so that belonging and inclusion is first looked at as the outcome and not just a compliance activity? So I do agree that the School Nutrition Association fits within those 4 systems, and quite frankly, we'd love to hear your perspective.
Others? Yes, ma'am.
So I see that you guys have gone and spoken with CEOs and executives. I see you guys have gone and spoken with CEOs and executives.
Have you thought about speaking to the custodial workers and the executive assistants and the cafeteria workers, the employees that's on the front lines to ask, to find out, hey, how do you feel? Like, do you feel like you belong? Asking those tough questions and then taking that back to the CEOs and executives to say, hey, this is how your employees really feel.
I promise that wasn't a plant question, because I've been waiting for someone to ask me that question. So after Thanksgiving, heading to a sweep of immigrant communities in Eastern Europe, taking this documentary and some of the material gleaned from this event to Berlin, Sarajevo, Prague, Athens, and Bucharest. And what we're trying, there's an algorithm for belonging, right? For cultural change. We know what it is in the US. You have the North Star. What's our North Star? Everybody, as a country. Declaration of Independence, okay? Non-binding legal document that has literally every social change movement in this country references the Declaration of Independence. If you can't see yourself in the North Star, there's no constellation, okay? So that's our North Star. Well, that's a different North Star in Greece, in Germany. There's different pivotal events. There's different foundings. I said we're on our third or fourth founding, depending on who you talk to. You know, if the revolution was the first founding in 1776, Civil War, World War II, and then the Civil Rights Act 30 years later, these are different foundings because we're a different country after those things. What does that mean in Greece? I don't know. I'm interested to learn. But we're going to start with the stuff right here. We're going to model for them. So thank you.
Great question. And I think we do need to go not only to them, but also to the interns, right? Future pipeline. Know that you represent an educational institution, but quite frankly, you said it best. 2025 is going to have a different demographic. And they're in a cancel culture. So they don't have to opt in to the traditional full-time view of the prior generations.
Yeah. I call Generation X baby boomer light, because we don't do massive protests, and I'm not going to blow up your spot. I'm going to talk to you privately, because that's how my parents would have done it. So we're baby boomer light. But the Zennials and Millennials are not. They are in your face this second, and shame is on the menu. Okay? Ask AT&T. Ask AT&T what happened to their stock price last week. Okay? That was a shaming campaign. Okay? If shame is on the menu, you got to get in front of that. Who else? Where else are we going? Yes, sir.
This is Roy. So the one thing keeps playing in my head, and I have to just voice it out. A lot of times it looks to me that we put so much focus on CEOs, which I agree change come from the top. But also, like, what about also awakening individuals on the value they can bring in? Because when you bring value, people always open the door for you to belong. So I'm thinking a lot of times we're just talking so much to the C-level and forgetting that the user, we have to educate people on how to elevate their own presence and their value in the society, because the door will open up for someone bringing value more than someone who's just a weight on an organization or a weight on a group of people. So I don't think we've talked enough about this, or I don't know if there is and I haven't seen it. What do you think about that point?
I agree. For me, this journey started with materials. I witnessed the 2016 election from Shanghai. I was an Eisenhower Fellow in China. I was a little surprised by the result. I was more surprised by the reaction to the result. And that's what shook me as an American in China trying to explain American culture, because I could not explain why people were running through the streets, flipping cars over after a fair election. I couldn't explain it. And so I knew that I didn't know enough about my country. And so I came to DC to work for Aspen, and I brought something called Becoming an Inclusive Republic. And literally it was just a text-based approach to understanding the greater narrative of our 245-year history as a country. That was for your average high school graduate, 11th grade reading level. I mean, there's a text is no more than 25 pages. We start at the Stamp Act Rebellion and end at Hillbilly Elegy. So you go from 1765 to 2016. And the intent was to get people to say, who is we? We hold these truths to be self-evident. Who is we? And how has our notion of we evolved? And where do we go from here? Those are the three questions. And so simple is more, I agree, and also talking to regular people, absolutely. But we have to do both, top down, bottom up, because the problem is just too big. We'll never get to unity if we don't do both. But thank you. Next. See,
you have one over there?
Great to be here, and thank you guys for your leadership here.
Thank you for your contribution.
Thank you. Just want to piggyback off of the gentleman who just spoke. So I agree with you. Clearly, leadership at the CEO level is really important, and also all throughout the organization. What you often hear in the corporate sector is you hear the CEOs on board. It's just getting that middle management level on board, and often that's where people don't feel included. Those are the folks who are overseeing the largest group of people in the organization. Mm-hmm. So as we think about belonging, how do we reach that middle group? And so I just wanted to pose that as a question.
Thank you.
You know, it's interesting. It's a great question. So one of the leaders there actually hired me when she was at G. Okay. And she had that same thought. And in fact, when I was at G, it was a different G. We call it that middle level, the mud. It's where nothing cascades and it translates through, right? It's where you do not feel it anymore. It's where it's great from a very high level storytelling, but honestly, I don't feel it in the parking lot when we do go to campuses. I don't feel it in the lunchroom. I don't feel a sense of belonging. And so what I'd love to do, both for the sake of time and also for making sure that we're held accountable, is make sure that we get those stories as well, right? It's because we hear you. And one of the things that we've started to do from the narration standpoint of this documentary is give it from the perspective of a young person who's riding along and saying, would I belong? If I'm a young Cordell making a decision to go to one of these corporations or one of these cities, and I've never heard of Springdale, Arkansas, would I want to go there? Or would I get stuck in the mud because I only listened to what I thought was a dream and I would have had that experience, but then I'm stuck in the middle and I never felt that. It was never realized. If you give us a second, I'd love to just kind of play you all the trailer to just hear the voice of a young person who's confused in this world, who's looking at it almost like a backseat passenger. Because if they don't get it, they're going to come into muddy situations and it will not work. So we hear you clearly. If we go to the next clip.
Unlike many people around this world, we ask, how did we get here? How did we become so divided? With everything that is going on, where do we go from here? Correction. Where can we realistically go from here? I decided it's time to take a trip across this great nation to figure out where there are seeds planted in soil of belonging and where there is soil yet to be tilled. I wonder what I will discover, specifically from leaders who are responsible for creating a culture of belonging in society and in business. Prepare to join me on the road trip to belonging.
Thank you for taking a moment to see some of these clips, but most importantly, Cordell just can't stop here.
No, definitely not, definitely not. There is so much more content and stories to leverage. We're telling the gospel. This is a good news, folks. I don't know about you, but I love being an American. And we have our issues, no doubt, but who doesn't? I think we're part of a great national story. And the more that we can tell it and tell each other the truth, the whole truth, I think we'll be a much better place for it. So Yes, the road trip absolutely continues. And SHRM has, what, over 500 chapters? There are people like you all over the country, all over the world. And we look forward to talking and engaging and taking this documentary to those very people.
Thank you for your time. Please open your doors and also join us on this trip where it's about belonging, it's about thriving, it's about you. Join us if you cannot do it physically by opening your doors. Join us virtually by, as Cordell said, taking just this little clips or the entire documentary into your organization and figure out what they're saying back. Figure out what the middle is saying back. I do think it'd be remiss, Cordell, if we don't acknowledge just two people and hop off the stage, one of which opened those doors in Pittsburgh and really made something significant happen because she was a technology leader at McKinsey there over the Pittsburgh region for many years, which was Hazel McLean, who's actually here, who opened up the Frick. She opened up BNY Mellon. We have a representative from BNY Mellon, several other people. And the other person who's been with us on all 7 cities, all 29 interviews, is actually probably going to be coming up asking you all some questions, who's the other producer, who we were able to steal some time. She spent many years at Channel 2 News in Atlanta, Hollywood, which is Stacey Lloyd. So,
yeah. And one more person, we forgot Michael Aiken, who's our co-producer on this effort, giving us the SHRM perspective, which is Legion, for they have many. So thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you all. More to come.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much. So SHRM is committed to this movement, and to do so, SHRM is providing this documentary to all Executive Network members for free so that you can bring it back to your corporations, bring it back to your organizations, and have it be part of the conversation, to begin the conversation. Also provided by SHRM are the conversation cards that you got in your bags yesterday, also created to help you have that conversation in a safe space. Because without the conversation, we're not going to have the movement. So now it's time for a 15-minute break, the last break of the summit, after which we're going to get into belonging applied. Thank you very much.